Welcome back. More than 69,000 children are currently living in care in England, and over 4,000 of these are currently waiting for a decision on their adoption.
Well, today, Prime Minister David Cameron has announced new measures to double the number of children placed with adoptive families sooner, halving the time they spend in care. And he's here now to tell us all about it. Morning, Prime Minister. Thank you for coming in. So how's this going to work?
Well, it's such an important thing. I mean, if you think about what more important thing can we do than give more children the chance to grow up in a warm and loving family home. Now, we've made some progress. Adoption numbers are up 72%. The amount of waiting times down by 5 months. But as your figures show, there are still thousands of children waiting for the chance to go to a loving home. So two things we're doing today. One is saying that all these different councils with their different adoption approaches, they're going to come together in regional organisations, so you get more adoptive parents available and more children available in the region, so they can be put together. And the second thing is complicated but absolutely vital. At the moment you can have foster parents who look after children, or you can have adoptive parents who adopt the children for forever. And what we're introducing increasingly is that you foster, but you're trying to adopt at the same time. And this so-called concurrency means that you can shorten the process massively and see many more children adopted.
I guess the scary thing about that, though, if you enter into the foster process and you have a child, you welcome them into your home, you love them as if they're your own, and then it's not completed into an adoption, or for whatever reason at the last minute, suddenly that child is taken away from your family. The emotional toll that would take on you as an individual would be terrible.
Well, it is difficult. This morning I met actually some parents who had fostered and adopted successfully, and I met one couple who had gone in for that, but in the end the child couldn't stay with them and had to, I think, go back to their birth parents. So, yes, you're right, we must make sure we prepare people properly for this, but it does shorten the time to make sure more children are adopted. Not all adoptive parents will want to take this fostering for adoption process, but many will, and if they do, we'll find many more children getting that loving home, which is what we want.
Well, you're going to have to be very joined up with this, because nearly half of councils, 60 out of 152, have no children placed with their adoptive families early. Yes. So we are all going to make this work, rely on the system.
That's right. You see, that's absolutely why we're doing this. You've got 150 councils, 68 of them don't actually do this early placement at all. So if we could get those 68 to do what the others are doing, which is good practice, and we saw each council adopt 4 more children a year, we'd double the number of children adopted every year. Think of that, another 5,000 children getting that warm, loving family home.
The council's got the money to do this?
Yes, funny enough, we'll save money by actually having regional adoption agencies rather than having every single council. At the moment, what you've got is every single council has to go out and find the parents, has to make sure they're placing the children, and so as a result, sometimes you're quite restricted geographically. Whereas actually, if you've got a child, you know, who needs a home and they're in Newcastle, if they can't find a loving family home in Manchester or in Leeds or in London, that's good for them.
We've had a comment come here through from Loretta. Good morning to you. She says, how can families afford to adopt when you're making it impossible to live out of poverty, referring to their tax credits?
Well, what we're seeing is many more families better off because, of course, 2.5 million more jobs have been created. We're also helping families next year by saying you can earn £11,000 before you pay any taxes at all. We're helping with childcare. In fact, one of the parents that I met today who just adopted said, thank you very much, we're using the 52 weeks shared parental leave. This was a gay couple, actually, who were adopting, and they were using the new adoptive procedures so they could take some time off to look after their new children. So we are helping families, but obviously we need to do more.
We see those questions all the time, and then there's the defeat in the Lords over the change to tax credits, which the bottom line of that was that families on the breadline, working class families, to lose £1,000. How can you possibly, when you read that, how can you shake off this great stone around the Conservative Party's neck that you just don't care?
Well, we do care, and the most important thing is getting families into work and having a strong and stable economy where we're able to provide good health and good schools and the rest of it. Now, obviously, we do have to save money in the welfare system. Our aim is a high-pay economy, which is why the national living wage is coming in, £7.20 next year, a really big pay rise for the lowest paid people in our country. But we want high pay and lower welfare, and that means we can spend more on our health service and on schools. And I think this is the right
Is the
approach.
message getting through, though? Because you once again, whenever we have you as a guest, you look at the comments, and people say that that you are out of touch. You don't know families on the breadline. You don't. They're not people that you would deal with.
I'm a
generally.
constituency MP. I have people coming to my surgery talking about their problems, their circumstances, how we can help. And that's why, as I say, what we're aiming for is higher pay, so people make more money, lower taxes, so they keep more of their own money to spend as they choose, and then helping with childcare, giving people 30 hours a week rather than 15 hours a week of free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds, giving tax relief on childcare. All of these things will help. But at the same time, as Prime Minister, I've got to try to make sure we're living within our means as a country. I mean, the worst thing for families is a budget deficit getting out of control, is having to make cuts in other areas, which we're trying to protect, like the health service, where more money is going in. But these are always difficult decisions. I accept that.
As the nature of the job, you are always going to have things that you want to achieve, things that you nearly achieve, things that you do achieve. So that comment that you made back in your kitchen before the election, where you said, right, that's it, you know, I'm going to do the 2 terms, not do the 3rd term. Have you regretted saying that when you look at the fact that, you know, that you are, in your eyes, you are making a difference, that you're going to walk away from it?
I think that 10 years as Prime Minister is a good long time, and I think after 10 years people will probably be happy to have another Prime Minister. So I think it was the right decision. I've got a strong mandate from the British people at the last election. We've got a packed agenda of things we need to do. But I think when it comes to the next election, it'll be good to have someone new to carry the torch forward.
Something else that's been big with us this morning, obviously in light of the Russian plane crash, and obviously there's speculation, and we still don't know the exact reason why that plane did disintegrate in the air. A lot of people asking, is air travel safe? Are we about to see a big step up in security? I mean, one lady in particular is travelling to Sharm el-Sheikh at the weekend with her husband. She doesn't want to go. What would you say to her?
Well, overall, air travel is a very safe form of transport. All the figures back that up, and we have a very strong safety culture in terms of airlines. We're obviously looking very carefully at the moment at what happened on that plane, the tragedy of those more than 220 people who lost their lives. I spoke to President Putin yesterday to give our nation's condolences to the many Russian families that lost loved ones. There's a meeting taking place right now to try and find out everything that we know, and if it's not safe, if certain routes aren't safe or certain things aren't safe, of course we'll act, but you have to act on the basis of evidence.
But what about those flying this afternoon? If you had a flight booked for you and your family this afternoon, EasyJet, Sharm el-Sheikh, would you get on
I
that
would
plane
always
this afternoon?
follow the travel advice, and the travel advice is very clear for that part of the world. We don't advise travel to parts of Sinai, but actually to Sharm el-Sheikh, we haven't changed the travel advice. But if anything changes, you know, we don't sit around and chew our pens and not act. If anything changes, it will be announced very quickly. But I say we must do it on the basis of evidence and not on speculation.
That must be, though, a great concern back in Downing Street with the security services, that if any terrorist organisation has managed to get hold of that sort of sophisticated kit, that you could bring a plane down at 31,000 feet, then that really is a game changer.
Of course, this whole area is one of huge concern. I mean, since I've been Prime Minister, we have stopped plots to blow up aeroplanes. Before I became Prime Minister, there was that celebrated case of people trying to take bottles of liquid, which included explosive material in them, to blow up airlines over the Atlantic. You know, so this is an area of concern, but we put an enormous effort in to try and crack these plots. We have a lot of airline security measures in place, as anyone travels knows, and we keep these things under permanent review. They're difficult decisions. The other day we had to take the decision to change the travel advice for Tunisia. We didn't do that straight after those terrible attacks in Sousse. Again, we wanted to look at the evidence, see what it really told us. But in the end, we thought, actually, there is too much of a risk, so we changed the advice. So we look at it very, very carefully.
It looks as if there is something of a disagreement, a fight, over how much access and the influence that politicians can have over who looks at our online
Yes.
activity.
Yes.
So should that be down to a politician or should that be down to the cause?
Well, I think politicians do have a role. We'll set out our plans on Wednesday. But politicians have a role, not least, to get this area of law right. You know, as Prime Minister, I feel my first duty is to try and keep the public safe. And at heart, what this whole investigative powers bill is really about is actually something quite simple, because we all know when it comes to missing children or hideous crimes and the like, we all know it's absolutely vital to be able, for the police to be able to know who called who and when. So did Philip Schofield make a particular call to a particular person at a particular time? And we use so-called communications data, telephone records, to prove that. The point we're making in this bill is, of course, lots of people now communicate using email or websites in order to do exactly the same thing. So we need to know who called who and when. So comms data, as it's called, communications data, not the content of the call, that's governed separately, but the who called who and when, we do need to make sure that we can follow that online as well as through a telephone call. And as Prime Minister, I would just say to people, please, let's not have a situation where we give terrorists, criminals, child abductors safe spaces to communicate. It's not a safe space for them to communicate on a fixed line telephone or a mobile phone. We shouldn't allow the internet to be a safe space for them to communicate and do bad things.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very
always,
much.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, still to come.